The following is a presentation of the Redskins Broadcast Network.
Welcome to Redskins Chronicles, presented by Crown Royal. I'm Larry Michael at Redskins Park. Each week, Redskins Chronicles takes an in-depth look at a piece of this team's storied legacy, and today, we're going to hear from former Redskin linebacker and Super Bowl champion Rich Milot. Before we do, Sunday, the Redskins visit Philadelphia. The Eagles tied atop the NFC East. With the Cowboys, they are 5-5. The Redskins, 3-6. And this Redskins-Eagles rivalry has certainly been physical over the years. Week 1 this year, the Redskins lost to the Eagles in Chip Kelly's debut, that game at FedEx Field. And when you look back on this rivalry, the hard-fought battles along the way have made winning very satisfying. Here's some of the highlights of the rivalry, brought to you by Ameritel. Philadelphia, home of the Liberty Bell, Rocky Balboa, cheesesteaks, and one of Redskins Nation's most hated enemies. Since 1934, the Redskins and Eagles have squared off in some of the most memorable games in each franchise's history. Whatever the record, whatever the standings, when these two teams meet, expect a classic NFC East slugfest. The early years of the rivalry were marked by Redskins dominance, with Washington winning 16 of the first 18 games in the series. In the late 50s, the Eagles gained the upper hand, one they strengthened further when Sonny Jurgensen became their starting quarterback in 1961. Under Jurgensen, the Eagles went 4-2 against the Redskins, but in 1964, a blindside hit to Jurgensen's career would give Washington their most lethal offensive weapon since Sammy Baugh.
I was having lunch and the guy walks in and said, "See where you were just traded to the Washington Redskins?" I said, "Don't tell me that." I said, "That's not true." I said, "You're just kidding." He said, "No, I'm not kidding. I just heard it." I couldn't believe it. I was shocked.
In his first game against his old team, Jurgensen and the Redskins made it clear who'd gotten the better end of the deal.
Adolph Christian Sonny Jurgensen throws his 5th touchdown pass of the game as he lays it on the Eagles with a scoring shot to Taylor. Jurgensen wins the battle of the quarterbacks, and Washington wins the war 35-20.
Throughout his Redskins career, Jurgensen had more success against the Eagles than any other team. He drove the point home in his final matchup against Philly in 1974. Hobbling off the bench to replace an injured Billy Kilmer, Jurgensen worked his magic one more time in front of the Philly faithful, leading the Redskins back from a 13-point third-quarter deficit to a crucial 27-20 win. The Eagles weren't much of a threat through the 60s and 70s, but when Dick Vermeil took over as Eagles head coach in 1976, Philly's stock began to rise. By the time they faced the Redskins in the '82 season opener, the Eagles were only 2 years removed from their first Super Bowl appearance. On the other side of the field, the unproven Redskins, under second-year head coach Joe Gibbs, remained a question mark. By the end of the day, question marks became exclamation points in what many call the most exciting game of the entire NFL season. Down 31-27 with less than a minute remaining, the Eagles' Harold Carmichael capped a 90-yard drive with a circus touchdown catch, but the Eagles' victory celebration was premature. Gibbs' growingly confident offense still had time to put the ball at the outskirts of kicker Mark Mosley's range. Mosley delivered on a 48-yard field goal that tied the game as time expired. And in overtime, he drilled a 26-yarder, officially snatching victory from the jaws of defeat.
We had done something incredible. We'd won a big football game. We did something on the road that people didn't expect. Nobody expected the Redskins to be that good.
In 1986, the Eagles welcomed a coach worthy of their bad boy image, Buddy Ryan, one of the few coaches able to get under Joe Gibbs' skin. Before a Monday night matchup in 1990, Ryan vowed the Redskins players would be taken off the field in body bags. Sure enough, during what would become known as the body bag game, 9 Redskins, including the only 2 active quarterbacks, left the game due to injury. But revenge would be sweet, and in the 1990 NFC wildcard game, the Redskins would taste it. Their 20-6 domination of the Eagles at Veterans Stadium effectively took out 2 birds with 1 stone. It was the end of the Eagles season and the end of Buddy Ryan's career in Philadelphia. He was fired the next day. Gibbs retired in 1992 with an 18-8 career record versus the Eagles, but for the next 13 years, under 4 different head coaches, the Redskins would spiral to a 6-18 record against their Pennsylvania neighbors. But in 2004, Gibbs returned, and by the last game of 2005, his Redskins were primed for the postseason once again. Their only obstacle, an Eagles team relishing the role of spoiler. It was a close-fought contest for much of the day, and the Eagles were up 20-17 heading into the fourth quarter. But when the team needed him most, Clinton Portis delivered perhaps his greatest run as a Redskin. An inspiring touchdown giving the Redskins the lead. Minutes later, Sean Taylor's 39-yard fumble return put the game out of reach, and the Redskins were headed to the playoffs. In 2012, the teams met at FedEx Field, both at 3-6 and desperate for a win. The Redskins proved they wanted it more as Robert Griffin III torched the Eagles secondary with 4 touchdowns in a 31-6 victory.
That's all I'm talking about, baby. This game, baby. Hey.
When the teams met in Philly 5 weeks later, the Eagles once again tried playing the spoiler to the Redskins' playoff hopes. But Washington held on for a 27-20 win and their first season sweep of the Eagles since 2008. Through the changing decades, players have come and gone, but the bitter nature of the Redskins-Eagles rivalry has remained a constant among both fan bases. If history is any indication, that's not likely to change anytime soon. The Redskins and Eagles renew the rivalry on Sunday in Philadelphia with a 1 o'clock kickoff. Now, earlier this week, Robert Griffin III met the media as the team prepared to face Philadelphia. Here is how some of that went.
Obviously, you play the game in a way that you're competitive. You have, the future in mind, but, you're still competitive on that day. And bottom line is I just can't be taking those amount of hits. In any of those games or any games in my career, you don't want to be hit that much. I just feel like everything is clicking for us a little bit better. We are putting up a lot of yards, we are putting up points, but at the end of the day, it comes down to winning the football games, and that's what we have to do. So, I think everybody sees it on the tape, and it's not just me, it's the whole offense. We're much improved, just in every, phase of the game right now for us. So, hopefully they do see that and they come ready to play because we're going to get everybody's best shot. We know that. We're in a similar situation as last year. We just got to go out there, take it one game at a time, one play at a time, and let the chips fall where they may. Focus on the little things, let the big things fall into place, and that's all you can control. The only thing we can control right now is getting to 4-6, and that's what we got to do. Yeah, I think it's just one at a time. And it's a cliche, it's a huge cliche, but everyone wants to talk about, 7-0 run, win the division, and, we just know we have to take care of Sunday. That's it. That's all we have. That's all a lot of guys have, and there's a lot of things at stake when it comes to those kind of games, and I think guys understand that. Last year we played with that same amount of pressure on us, and we performed. I don't think it's going to crush anybody. They say pressure breaks pipes, and I don't think it will.
More on the Redskins-Eagles matchup coming up later in the show. Each week on Redskins Chronicles, we take a look at this team's history through the eyes of the men that played the game. And coming up, Amanda Mitchell and Redskins historian Mike Richman sit down with legendary Redskin linebacker Rich Milot. And Diageo reminds all Redskins fans responsibility is a team sport. Please drink responsibly. More of Redskins Chronicles after a quick timeout. Redskins Chronicles is brought to you by AAA.
Welcome back to Redskins Chronicles. I'm Amanda Mitchell, joined by Redskins historian Mike Richman.
Thank you.
And one of the finest linebackers to play the game for the Washington Redskins, Rich Milot. Rich, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
Nice to see you. What have you been up to since last time we saw you? I believe we saw you at some of the Redskins 80th events.
Not too much. I have a daughter plays soccer. Been doing a lot of that stuff with her. I'm a tax advisor, so that's a busy time in the wintertime for me to do that. But nothing else. Really, mostly family stuff. The kids. I don't know if you've ever had kids play soccer. It consumes a lot of time.
Well, speaking of kids, we want to hear about your early years and how you got into the great game of football. Talk to me about being raised in Coriopolis, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh is a huge football town. Who got you into the game?
Not actually getting me into the game. I was just a huge Baltimore Colt fan back in the day. I was the Johnny Unitas era, and I remember sitting in the car just listening to it, but really never did much. I actually grew up in the eastern part of Pennsylvania around Allentown, and then I moved to Pittsburgh. Went out for football when I was in the 9th grade, never played until probably the last game. I was 6'5", almost at that time, 145 pounds, and they had me an offensive and defensive line.
So then you only played 1 year as a lineman. What caught a guy like Joe Paterno's attention? That was linebacker university. How did he know?
I actually went to Penn State as a running back.
Okay.
And I played in the Big 33 as a running back, and really a tall, skinny running back. But I think I averaged 10 or 11 yards a carry my senior year. So I had some pretty good games. And so that's where they got me. I think what was funny was I was recruited both by Ohio State and Penn State. Ohio State, the guy that recruited me was Joe Bugel. And they wanted me to play what they call a monster linebacker. And believe it or not, that's what I ended up at Penn State, playing that type of linebacker. So if I would have gone there, I would have played that for 4 years. Penn State only played it 1 year. So.
And then you were part of that 1979 draft. That's actually one of the greatest drafts in Redskins history, but it gets overlooked because of 1964 and 81. But you came in.
You know, I think it's the best draft the Redskins ever had. I'm going to be very honest with that. Donnie Warren was a fourth round pick. He was the first. Donnie played, 15 years? I was the 7th round pick. I played 9. Neil Oakwitz. I never remember whether Neil or Monty was drafted, but I think, Monty was drafted in the 12th round. Monty played, 17, 18 years?
3 Super Bowls.
Neil came in as a free agent, played 13 years. I mean, those were just the only picks we really had that year. And we had a couple free agents come in, but I mean, those were just great. And then you said the next year and the next year after that. I think Bobby Beathard did a great job with picking the guys back in the day.
You were a career Redskin. Talk to me about all the years, the coaches that you saw.
You know, the guy that made the biggest impact on me was Larry Peccatello. Jack Pardee was the first coach, and quite honestly, the only negative I had about Jack, I really liked him. I didn't think he had a great staff, and we really didn't even have a linebacker coach at that time. Jack would coach us, but he was off being the head coach. And quite honestly, I think if it wasn't for Larry Peccatello, I don't think I would have been able to play as long as I did.
I was just going to ask you about Petitbon as the defensive coordinator. So did he teach you a lot of fundamentals as well?
Well, Richie never taught us the fundamentals because he was more of the defensive backs. But I liked the way we played. We were very aggressive, and that's the way Richie liked to play. And we did a lot of things they don't do now. We were a man-to-man team. We did a lot of man-to-man. I always hear on TV how the linebackers can't cover the tight ends. That's all we did. Monty had the linebackers on just about every play. I mean, the tight ends on just about every play. So we did a lot of that, and I just loved that defense back then. They don't play anything like it now.
Going back to the 82 season, we had the Eagles this week, and I wanted to ask you about the season opener, 1982. It has to be one of the biggest wins in the Joe Gibbs era, 37-34 Redskins over the Eagles. Can you talk about that game and how important it was to you guys?
I don't think we realized how important it was at that time. For me personally, I remember, I remember making plays personally that I didn't think I could make, and I keep going back to the coaching at that time. And but I don't think we really realized. I don't think most people realize, but we were back in the preseason. There were a lot of newspaper people saying that we wouldn't win a game. So, and but it just built on itself, and it's kind of hard to think back to those games, to be honest with you.
So you mentioned 1985 as quite possibly your favorite year as a Redskin. We have all the tapes from that year, so let's take a look at some of the footage from 1985.
The 80s also witnessed John Riggins become the NFL's 4th all-time leading rusher and 2nd all-time leading touchdown scorer, while George Rogers rushed for a single-game team record 206 yards in 1985. While the offenses were flashy, the defenses were nasty. Under Gibbs, Washington has consistently ranked among pro football's best defenses versus both the pass and run. The Redskins have made a lasting impression in the 80s, playing incredible games, such as the 1982 NFC Championship.
The 80s were definitely big years for the Washington Redskins. We're going to talk a little bit more about that when Redskins Chronicles returns. Welcome back to Redskins Chronicles. We're joined by Rich Milot. Now, during the break, Rich let me know that 1985 was not the most fun season as a Washington Redskin. What was the best
I'll
season?
be honest with you, they were all fun.
Yeah.
It was just the one I thought I played better. The fun ones when you go all the way and go to the Super Bowl, but and I think we got stopped by the Bears that year, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not totally, but honestly, we had a great group of guys. There's pictures up now about the days we went down to Dallas in fatigues. You don't see anybody doing anything like that. And it was good that we had a head coach that allowed us to do that stuff and knew the importance of guys getting together and having a good time also.
You had guys like Charles Mann and Darryl Green. Talk to me about some of your teammates that were inspirations to you and friends.
Probably the friends that I had were Mark Murphy, Neil Okowitz, Curtis Jordan. Those were the type of guys that I hung out with, and it was just a fun group. I think Monty Coleman and Mel Kaufman. We just seemed to all hang out together. Raven Caldwell, I know Raven was almost a different era, but he became a good friend of ours. Pete Cronin too. I can't forget Pete. Pete was probably the funniest guy on the team. Now he never gets credit. You hear all about John's antics. Pete was the funniest guy on the team. And you can go back to the '80s, and I can't tell you some of the stuff that he did.
Joe Gibbs does talk about the unheralded players, such as Larry Cuban and Pete Cronin, as being so instrumental to the team's success during that era. They were guys who kind of slipped under the radar.
Those two guys, but there was a guy named Otis Wansley, and I don't think most people remember Otis. I, to this day, think he was one of the best special team players that I'd ever seen play. Tough guy. And when I hear all the other great specials, I never hear his name mentioned. And me being there with him for so long, he's the guy that sticks out there. Really, really made a lot of plays, especially special team. But I think all of the guys, we had very few guys that were, we played very good as a team. So there were a lot of situations where guys like Monty Coleman, Monty could probably rush the quarterback and get 15, 20 sacks a game. I mean, he was that quick off the ball. But he was in coverage a lot. So we all did things that maybe didn't fit our strengths that much, but it was all a team game.
Seems like you were such a unit. Did you have any pregame rituals or superstitions that you all took?
No, I really don't. But this last year's, now I'm going into last year's Redskin game. That's the first Redskin team that I thought was made and built by the same type of players. They seemed like the type of guys, very few of them were in it for themselves. And honestly, it was the first time that I really got excited about a team. Same type of character guys I think that we had back in the 80s. So if they can all stay healthy, I think they're going to do very well.
Do you consider yourself a Redskins fan?
Yeah, I do consider myself a Redskins fan. I think everybody would admit to you honestly when they initially go out, you stay away from it for a while. I noticed I missed things in phases. The very first phase was like you miss your friends. And then you miss the limelight, maybe that a little bit, and then you miss the game. And I got to the point where I start missing the game. And I'm probably a bigger Redskin fan now than I was in the past.
How thrilled were you with the Redskins winning the NFC East last year?
It wasn't just that they won it, it was how they won it, the character that the guys showed on the field. They were a tough team. And again, it was hard to pick out, well, other than the quarterback, it's hard to pick out the stars of the team. All the guys seemed to play very, very, very well together. That's the type of team that wins it for you.
Rich, talk to us more about some of the current linebackers that play the game.
The actual current linebackers are so much different than when we played back in the game. It's hard for me really to evaluate them. Most of the outside guys are more pass rushers than they are linebackers. And I can't even imagine playing an inside on a 3-4. I don't think we were big enough in our era to do that. These guys are all 260. They have to take on guards. And we played a 4-3. You were pretty protected. Because actually, my day, I played on the outside, and on passing downs, I actually moved into the middle. There are some great linebackers, and again, but most of them are great pass rushers. I think that's the way that they evaluate linebackers nowadays.
So what's your best advice for a young linebacker coming up into the NFL right now?
I think it's learn the game, get a good coach to teach you the game. It makes it so much easier for you. And once you start getting older, if you've got the fundamentals down, that's pretty much any sport. And everybody gets older, so you can always rely on those fundamentals. And speed and quickness are more than, I tell the little kids, I see a lot of little kids, they want to play football at 5, 6. I say, get into a sport that helps you with your speed and quickness, because that's really what the game is now.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us. Well, the Redskins have the Eagles this week, so we'll take a look at what the Redskins are up to when Redskins Chronicles returns.
Redskins Chronicles is brought to you by Diageo. Reminds all Redskins fans, responsibility is a team sport. Redskins Chronicles is brought to you by AAA. Welcome back to Redskins Chronicles. I'm Larry Michael. A Sunday matchup in Philadelphia, the Redskins and Eagles. Philly's coming off a big win in Green Bay, 27-13. Nick Foles has taken command as a starting QB for the Eagles. He's helped them get to 500, 5-5, tied atop the NFC East with the Cowboys. LaShawn McCoy leads the NFL in rushing, 932 yards, and averages 4.8 yards a carry. He also leads the NFL in total yards from scrimmage, 1,258 yards. He is a double threat. Defensively, Philadelphia has struggled. They're rated 31st in the league and 31st against the pass. Ironically, Philadelphia has yet to win at home this year. In fact, they've lost 10 straight at home. And the Redskins hope it stays that way, as the Skins need a win to inch closer into contention, where a 500 record might just win the division. Thank you so much for watching Redskins Chronicles, presented by Crown Royal. I'm Larry Michael, and we'll see you right here next week.